Good morning and welcome to the Flexible Space Association's first Flex Generation webinar. I'm Jane Sartin, I run Flexa, and we've just launched Flex Generation. We launched it at a conference in May with the aim of supporting particularly those aged 35 and under working in the flexible workspace industry. It will provide information in different ways, hopefully support, inspire, bring them together. So the webinars are just one route. And the first webinar today is looking at social media, and we are joined by Leanne Hewer from Carnsite Communications, who's going to take us through a presentation and then is very happy to answer your questions at the end. So if you've got any questions as we go through, please add them into the chat box and we will pick them up at the end. But I will hand over now to Leanne. I'll just get your presentation up.
Thank you very much.
And there you go.
Okie dokie. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Flexa, for having me today. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join me. So yeah, as Jane said, we're going to be chatting about social media today, specifically how to make social media work for you. But before we launch straight in, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about me so you have a bit of context. So as Jane said, my name is Leanne Hewer. I'm an account director at Carnsite Communications. That's a PR and communications agency which is based between Bristol and Bath. So our motto, our tagline is we're all about practical, powerful PR and social media. And what that means in practice is we're very results driven. So we like to make a lot out of very little. We understand that business owners and professionals in general are pretty short on time and have a lot of places they need to put their energy. So we really try and make the PR and social media work and practical for them. We specialize in founder-led businesses, but actually work across a huge range of sectors, one of which is property and specifically the flexible workspace industry. So hopefully that makes me well positioned to talk to you all today. So let's hop right in. So first of all, I wanted to address what making social media work for you actually means, at least to me, and kind of what drives the direction for what I'm going to talk about today. So for me, making social media work for you means making sure that you can achieve higher quality connections and followers via social media. It means having access to the right educational and also entertaining content online. It means being part of meaningful conversations and communities, forming connections with people. And perhaps most of all, one that's often overlooked, I think, is actually being able to enjoy the time that you spend on social media at the same time as well. So if we go right from the very beginning in terms of choosing the right platform, I think one of the most common kind of misunderstandings about social media is that there's so many different platforms out there that I think sometimes businesses and professionals feel like I've got to be everywhere. You know, that from TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, there's all sorts. And I think people can overwhelm themselves by trying to sign up for them all at once. But ultimately, what you need is just to reach your target audience. So you need to pick the platform that most of your target audience are using, which in the context of the flexible space industry, I think is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still the best platform for building professional connections. And so that's what I'm going to kind of focus in on today. But I do want to say that everything that I have to say about LinkedIn can apply to other social media platforms. So that advice can be applicable depending on where you're at. I also wanted to point out that on LinkedIn specifically, personal profiles will pretty much always outperform business or brand profiles. We work with a lot of different companies and kind of helping them out with their social media and specifically their LinkedIn. And often they want to put focus into the brand or business profile, which is understandable, you know, if you're trying to build your awareness around your brand. But actually, personal profiles are probably the better place to start for the pure reason that the way that the algorithms are built, personal profiles profiles are always going to be able to kind of get more reach and engagement. Actually, personal profiles generate 3 times more impressions and 5 times more engagement than company pages. So I think let's start with kind of the personal profile. And I think, as I said, there are a couple of different elements that come into that, one of which being that the algorithm and the way that the platforms are built are kind of built in a way to really push personal profile content. But I think it's also reflective of the fact that social media is about people, and people want to feel like they're interacting with other people rather than businesses. So while there's absolutely value in business profiles, I think a good place to start is always going to be your personal LinkedIn profile, or a profile centered around you as a person and a professional. So, especially when we're talking about LinkedIn, I think there's again a misconception around the tone and kind of way that people talk on LinkedIn. I think traditionally LinkedIn has been obviously a very corporate and very professional platform, and that very much still is the case to a degree. But the line between professional and personal is really not as hard as you might think. And actually seeing success on any social media, particularly LinkedIn today, means blending and balancing your professional and personal personas and your professional and personal life. And you're ultimately going to find that you see more success when you're willing to share a little bit of the personal on a platform like LinkedIn as well. So as a start point, whether you're creating your LinkedIn profile for the first time ever, or whether you already have one and you're kind of looking at how you can improve it, or kind of going back to basics and resetting it, I think a really good thing to think about is when you're looking at your connections or the pages you follow, the content that comes up on your feed, is it a blend of your personal and professional interests? If it all is feeling very, very professional, very corporate heavy, and you're only following accounts that you feel like you really need to follow for work, you might find that you're actually limiting yourself in terms of success on the platform, and also you're probably not going to get as much enjoyment out of it. So for example, I've popped a post that I did on the side there, but in essence, one of my hobbies outside of work, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is writing children's stories, and I'm a big reader. So as well as kind of all of the communications and PR contacts and things like that I follow and interact with on LinkedIn, I also follow a lot of children's publishers and children's book authors and illustrators, because that's a personal interest of mine. And actually some of the most successful interactions and content that I have on LinkedIn has come from drawing those two worlds together, you know, talking about the things that I've learned from writing stories for children and how it relates to my job in communications, etc., etc. So make sure that when you're setting up or choosing who you follow or who you connect with on LinkedIn, you're balancing that personal and professional element. Of course, when you're talking about a professional profile, there are going to be things that you want to share there and things that you want to share on a more personal profile on a different platform that you might not be comfortable talking about on LinkedIn, where, you know, your co-workers or your boss is going to be frequently interacting with you. So that's something to bear in mind. I think going into it, it's really good to have an idea of where the line is drawn for you personally. So it can be good to have a bit of an outline of what's too personal for you to share on LinkedIn. So for example, some people are very comfortable talking about their spouses or their children. You know, some people have really, really honed in on that and are very, you know, vulnerable on social media, and that's great. But some people don't feel comfortable doing that. So I think it's about kind of defining your own boundaries, what you're willing to share, and then making sure that those form kind of the basis for how you interact on the platform moving forward. So the one thing that I want you to take away from today's webinar, if nothing else, and I know it seems quite strange to get into that straight away, but I want you to remember that above all else, social media, every single social media out there, including LinkedIn, is meant to be social. It is built around the idea of socialization and connection. And I think with LinkedIn, or when we talk about any social media platform for business use, sometimes we can go into it with the mentality of selling or profit, or any of the things around really pushing our business, which of course there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think we sometimes miss the point of what social media was built for. And when we really embrace the fact that social media is social, we can see the most success with it, and actually you get more engagement, etc. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I think it's also worth noting that the best social media is always going to be the social media that you actually use. And I think the barrier for a lot of people is that they don't necessarily want to spend time on LinkedIn. And I think there are a lot of things that come into that. But that thing I talked about in terms of following things that you're personally interested in and focusing on the social element, I think can really help make the platform more appealing to spend time on. I think obviously I'm coming back to that idea of people buy from people. And actually, though LinkedIn is created as a sort of professional and business platform, behind every single one of these businesses, behind every single account, there is a human being, multiple human beings, and they all have, personalities, likes and dislikes. They all have different opinions on things. And so I think one of the reasons that social media and LinkedIn is really focused on that personal element is because that's how we connect as people, and that's what we're immediately drawn to. And then going back to that idea I said of drawing boundaries and this line between personal and professional, I think you're going to see the most success on any social media platform, again, thinking about LinkedIn specifically, if you can be the most complete version of yourself that you're comfortable with being on the platform. So I think we've moved away from an era of social media that's very polished and curated. And obviously there's still an element of that, but I think increasingly the content that really flies on social media, again, even platforms that traditionally this might not have been the case for, is the content that feels very real and feels human. And so the more that you can embrace sharing your full self, the better. And again, I think setting boundaries and deciding what you're comfortable sharing and what you're not is a really good way to make sure that you're clear with yourself about that. So I've talked a lot about personal and sharing, and that can be a bit intimidating, but I wanted to say, rest assured that making social media work for you actually doesn't mean talking all about yourself and really, sharing everything. In fact, success on social media is often about making it as not about you as possible. And that comes back to this social media is social element that I talked about. So when you like, comment, share, send posts on LinkedIn or any social media platform, you're going to greatly increase your reach. So for example, on LinkedIn, when you do that, you increase your reach by about 300%. So that means that when you're commenting and liking and all that kind of stuff on other people's posts, not only are people in your connections obviously going to see that comment, but so are the people on the from the connections of the person who posted initially. So you're kind of opening it up wide to a huge, whole new group of people. So one of the first things that I think, is worth doing when you're trying to make social media really work for you and push its effectiveness is making sure you set aside time in your day, or maybe it's, once or twice a week if you can, to dedicate to social networking on social media. So what I mean by that is liking, commenting, sharing, and actually interacting with other people's contents. This isn't about what you're posting. It's about what everybody else is posting and how you're responding to it. And if you've built your feed right, based on kind of everything I've said about including some things that personally interest you, as well as what professionally interests you, this should actually be a really fun experience, like on, maybe in your personal life, you spend some time scrolling Instagram and the algorithm is very curated to show you the things that you're most interested in. We want to kind of teach the LinkedIn algorithm to do the same. And actually, if we've been able to curate it in that way, your LinkedIn feed should be filled with things that you actually want to comment on and you want to engage with. So that's a really positive thing as well. So A big question we get asked when I tell people, okay, you really need to focus on commenting is, but what on earth should I actually comment? I think we've all had that point where we've seen a post and we think, I really would like to join that conversation. I really would like to be a part of that, but I have no idea what to say. And that can be a bit intimidating. So I've put down a list of a couple of do's and don'ts for how to approach writing comments on other people's posts. So my main don't is that LinkedIn has recently introduced a new AI feature. And again, I'm not anti-AI, but they've introduced a new AI feature, which means that when you click to comment on someone else's post, it often will suggest you an AI generated response. Now, I would really encourage you to avoid using these if you can. You know, AI is wonderful for a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about that again a bit later. But the AI generated comments feel very AI. They're not very human. And I think they miss a little bit the point of social media, that idea that social media is meant to be social. The comments that AI will often prompt for you to post, they don't really move the conversation forwards. They don't really add anything to what's happening in the comments section of posts. They're usually some sort of generic post like great post or really interesting. And you know, while that's nice and it might seem validating, it's not going to get you recognized. What is going to get you recognized in the comment section is giving a really thoughtful response that's very personal to you. So try and avoid that if you can. And then some do's, some things that you should definitely think about when you're writing comments. So do think about relating your personal experiences. So, you know, if a post makes you think of something that happened to you, or you can compare and contrast, you know, if it reminds you of a thought that you had or something that you've seen, relate that. I think that's really, really good. And it's often the easiest way to make connections as humans. We want to be able to validate each other's experiences and feelings. And actually, that's a really nice way to do it. You can share how and why you agree or disagree with someone's point. Now, obviously, the key there is doing it respectfully and in the right way. We all know that comment sections, when an argument starts, can be a little bit heated, but actually, you know, there are also plenty of really healthy, engaging conversations about the way that different people experience things, or maybe different trends that they're seeing. So it's okay to say that, you know, if someone shares an opinion or something that they're noticing within, say, their flexible workspace, but actually you've experienced something slightly different, and, you know, you can say, oh, this is really interesting. I've actually found in our space, etc., etc. So think about comparing and contrasting in that way as well. And then lastly, I think it's really important to remember that you're allowed to have a tone of voice and a personality in comments. So, you know, do feel free to make jokes or use emojis or GIFs, you know, where it's appropriate, depending on what you're commenting on. But I think, again, there's a bit of a fear on LinkedIn of being informal or, you know, leaning a little bit more into personality. But again, that's what gets you noticed. That's what makes you stand out. People want to make those professional connections. So those are a couple of tips for what to do and not to do when it comes to approaching writing comments. So now we've covered, you know, setting up your profile, making sure you're following the right people, things that interest you, and we've talked about interacting with other people's content. Now we can think about what you need to post, or, you know, what you should be posting. I think a mistake that is often made is people start here rather than with other people's content. So make sure that you do interact with other people's content, and that's your main kind of starter before you start going into, you know, oh, what do I need to post and how often I need to post, etc., etc. So what do you need to post? We're coming back to that AI point that I made. So AI, as I said, is a really wonderful thing. It's great for accessibility, and you know, lots of people are using it. I use it, but I think the key thing to remember is there are things that AI is and isn't supposed to be for, and there are things that AI is and isn't good at. And I think AI is wonderful for idea generation, brainstorming ideas, you know, asking for feedback, maybe asking for suggested topics, looking at, you know, trending topics, or helping you think of new pain points to address. But what AI is not great at is copywriting. And obviously it's getting better the more and more that AI is being developed. But copywriting that comes from AI often sounds very AI, especially if you're not super familiar with the kind of tools and tricks for prompting it correctly. I think LinkedIn in particular, but all social media platforms are becoming a little bit inundated with AI generated copy. And you'll probably be able to see it because unfortunately, AI has a bit of a formula for how it writes social media posts. And you'll be able to see that they often have exactly the same layout. They often put emojis in exactly the same places. You know, the M dash has become a big controversy in terms of that being a sign of AI. But the point is that AI is a great idea generation, but it's not going to make you stand out when it comes to writing the post. So by all means, use it to help you come up with ideas. But I really, really wouldn't recommend using it to generate the copy and just copy and pasting it, because I don't think that's going to kind of see you well on the platform. So some general principles to remember when it comes to what you should post and kind of what themes you should be talking about. I think a really good thing to kind of have up front is the idea of this 80-20 rule. So some of you might have heard of it already, but the idea is that 80% of the content that you share and that you post should serve your audience. So it should be very much focused on them and what they're interested in. So you have to make sure that that content is entertaining or educational. You want to address their pain points and what their experiences, the things they're going through. Ultimately, you want to give them a reason to care. You know, why should they look at your content? Why should they bother stopping to interact with it? I think some people forget that actually, if you read your post and think honestly with yourself, you know, would I scroll past this? Would I stop and look at this post? Because if the answer is no for you, then the chances are is very much going to be no for your audience as well. So make sure you put those first. You put your audience first when you're writing your content 80% of the time. And then 20% of the time, you can share some slightly more self-focused content that can be a little bit more salesy or maybe pushing your services. You know, it can be a bit more direct and serve your purposes in a more direct way. And actually, if you split it like that, you're going to find that that 20% lands a lot better because you've balanced it with that other 80%. And actually, you'll find that the 80% does a lot more of the selling than you might think. It's just in a slightly more indirect way. So really focus on that education or entertainment element serving your audience. In terms of what formats are good to post, video is doing best at the minute, and honestly it has done for a really long time. I think the internet as a whole is very much moving towards prioritizing video. I think TikTok very much led the way with that, and all social media platforms, LinkedIn included, are moving towards that to try and compete with the likes of TikTok. So video content is always being pushed by the algorithm, and it's content that people really, really like to see. Now, video is something that we often get pushback from our clients. We understand that A, it takes a little bit of time. B, it can be a little bit intimidating to put yourself out there on video. But it's one of those things that is really, really worth doing. So something that I recommend is if you haven't done any video before on social media and you're feeling a little bit apprehensive, shall we say, perhaps try filming some LinkedIn content or some social media content that you have no intention of posting. So for example, you know, you can just be at home or, you know, in the office, you can record yourself as if you were going to post this post, and just do that a couple times, get yourself a bit more comfortable in front of the camera, you know, watch yourself back. I know we all hate watching ourselves back. I'm sure when I watch this webinar back, I'll be horrified to hear my own voice. But ultimately, practice is what's going to make it come easier. And actually, the more that you do it, the more comfortable you'll be, the more natural you're going to sound. And at some point, it's going to come to the bit where you have to just press post and see what happens. But again, the more you do that, the easier it's going to come. The second thing to bear in mind in terms of format is grabbing people with real life visuals. So where you can, try your best to avoid stock images. Again, there's nothing wrong with it if you have to, or, you know, if it suits the post. But generally, photography that's real photography you've taken, even a selfie on your phone or a picture of the outside or whatever it is, that often does better than kind of stock footage or graphics. Again, it depends on the content, but as a general rule, people like to see images and content that feels real and feels human. It feels relatable, and I think that's why real life visuals actually do a lot better. And I think that's also a kind of signal for how we're moving as a world, I suppose, on the internet across all social medias. I think specifically with kind of younger generations, so we're talking like Alpha, Gen Z, millennials. I think we sort of got to a point where social media went from being very aesthetic driven, very polished and curated, to, again, I think TikTok led the way a little bit with kind of a slightly more rough around the edges, real feeling content. And I think people are more drawn towards that now. So it's something that's worth bearing in mind, because again, I think when people think professional, often people conflate professional with curated and polished. But I would argue that there's a definition of professional that kind of goes a bit beyond that. So that's something to think about as well. And then lastly, faces perform really well. So that goes back to the visuals and it goes back to the video. But we have tested this, especially at Carnsite, and it goes overall. But as soon as you put one of our faces from the team along with a post, even if it's a text post or whatever it might be, that will get more interaction because of the relatability element. In terms of content ideas, so what should I actually be talking about? I've just popped down a few kind of guiding principles. So that can be things like maybe you can debunk some myths within your industry. Maybe you can share a day in the life. We're nosy as people. We like to see what people are up to. Have a look at awareness days. There's an awareness day for everything. And sometimes that can be really helpful when it comes to prompting ideas for content. Talk about hobbies and experiences, share your take on industry news. Flexer in particular are really great at kind of getting in there, sharing opinion pieces, stats about the industry. So keep an eye on what they're doing and make sure that you're sharing that and talk about that. I suppose that's another point actually is, as a member of Flexer, you'd be surprised what you can get out of really partaking in the community, connect with your fellow members, like and share each other's content. I know Jane works really hard on social media to boost Flexer member content as well. So that's something to really bear in mind. And then also feel free to talk about issues you care about. Maybe it's kind of young people in the flexible space industry. Maybe it's sustainability, whatever it is, feel free to talk about that as well. So now, we've talked about all of that. We talked about what you're posting. How do you measure the success of the content? So I think people get hung up a bit in likes. I think everyone goes to likes and followers. But actually what your goal is will impact what metrics you should be looking at. So for example, at the very early stages, you're probably going to be focused on raising awareness. So just reaching as many people as you possibly can, in which case reach, impressions and follower growth are going to be kind of important stats for you. But do think about reach. In terms of if you're looking to start building a community, you're going to want to be boosting engagement. So that is things like likes, comments, shares, saves. If you're trying to drive traffic to the website, obviously it's going to be click-through rate. And if you're trying to increase conversions, you're going to be looking at more of the advertising side of it. So that's things like cost per result and return on ad spend and things like that. I guess a quick note about that, I haven't touched much on the paid for element of social media here on purpose. And that's because I think people are very quick to rush to put money behind things before they've really nailed down their strategy. So I would really advise before you go looking into, ad boosting and things like that, really nail down your organic strategy. Now, it is 100% true that putting money behind it, paying for LinkedIn Premium, is going to push all of these metrics. But until you've got a strategy, there's really not a lot of point in putting money behind it, because you need to work out what you're trying to do first. And the other note I wanted to make is these stats are obviously a really helpful metric, but try not to get hung up on them too much. The algorithm changes a lot, and actually we're seeing a mass decrease in reach and engagement at the minute across all accounts, across all of LinkedIn. And that's just because they make a lot of adjustments to the algorithm at different times, and that means different things. So try and keep up to date with kind of algorithm changes where you can. But it's okay if a post doesn't get seen all that much. Don't delete it. That tells the algorithm that it's not that important. Just keep trying and don't be defeated. So that's a note on metrics. So that's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour on social media and making it work for you. But I wanted to just say, remember, above all else, social media is about being social. So the best thing you can do is interact with other people. And I've also just put a little picture there of our ebook, Practically Powerful PR, which you can get on Amazon, which goes way more in depth on all of this stuff. So thank you so much. I'll hand over to Jane.
Thank you, Leanne. That was an awful lot of information packed in there. So I think that would be really useful. The reference to awareness days struck me because I think our industry is pretty good at that. We have things like National Biscuit Day, and
Yes.
so it's perhaps thinking about those lighter things as well, rather than particularly maybe if you're thinking about where to start.
Yes.
Then that's perhaps a good way. And do you think people need to be posting every day, once a week? Is there a sort of ideal?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think if you kind of look into it in terms from an algorithmic perspective, there probably are kind of best times to post. There are definitely frequencies. I mean, ultimately, the more you post, the better. However, I think, again, when you're starting off, a lot of people get caught up on that. And, you know, they might post every single day for 2 weeks and then they'll disappear for 2 months. And actually, the thing that social media rewards the most is consistency. So it's much better to post, you know, 3 times a week for a month than, you know, every day for a week and then not again for a month.
Yeah, let's bring us back on screen. And I think a lot of flexible workspace companies, they encourage staff to post, but others don't. And if you're perhaps somewhere where your colleagues aren't posting much and maybe you're a bit nervous about starting, any tips on encouraging? So I think it's probably easier, isn't it, if you feel like your colleagues are also posting things. Any suggestions on how to encourage that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, I mean, the easiest thing, the first thing is leading by example. Obviously, it's much easier if you're posting to show other people, actually, this is kind of what you can do. I think some organizations make it part of objectives. So that's, you know, that's a very rigid way of doing it, but often that works. I think a lot of it is down to education as well, you know, doing things like this, understanding how you can do it in a way that feels natural to you. And also, I think, you know, we've done a couple of workshops and things with different organizations, just going in and talking to the employees about how impactful it really is when you interact with your business. So I think, you know, making sure that everyone understands the point can be a really useful thing to do as well.
Okay. And is there a limit to what can be achieved through organic social media growth, particularly?
Yeah, so I suppose there is, and as I mentioned, I've kind of focused on organic for the purposes of, I think that's the place you need to start. But paid for is really, really effective, and increasingly social media platforms are pushing paid for the obvious reason is they need to make money. And so you know, if you boost posts and things like that, it is going to get you more reach. But ultimately, it's about thinking, you know, what good is that reach if I haven't nailed what the content says that I'm reaching them with and things like that. I suppose if you're ready to start with paid content and kind of exploring that, there is LinkedIn Premium, which is sort of a membership that you can buy, and that kind of walks you through the process of sort of starting to include kind of money into the equation. So I think that's a good thing to start with as well.
Yeah, so it's maybe starting slowly on that side. I know that when I particularly, if I'm posting from the Flexer account on LinkedIn or Instagram, it will quite often come back and suggest that I might like to boost this by paying them some money, which I have done occasionally, but not very often. But it's, I guess it's sort of being confident with what you're doing first before you head down, because there's definitely not a need to pay, is there?
No, exactly. And I think, you know, there's an argument that it's all about the content. And actually, if you're being really effective with the content, payment is more of a boost than it's not going to kind of stand for you. So.
Okay, well, thank you. We will end there, but we will share the video of this on LinkedIn as well as on other ways. We always do that with our webinars afterwards, and we will share the recording with everyone that signed up so they can see that again. I shouldn't ask this live. Are you happy for us to share your presentation, Leanne, as
yes,
well?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Thank you. That was good that was the answer then. That would have been a little but there was a lot of useful information in there as well. So that we will send that out as well. So this was the first. It was a great way to start as the first of our Flex Generation webinars. But we have a number of others coming up. In September, we'll be looking at personal leadership, and then in October, we have public speaking and networking as two separate webinars. The details of the first one of these is on the events page of the Flexer website at the moment, but we'll be rolling that out. And we're also building up a list of people that are interested in Flex Generation events, and there's a sign up form on our website for that as well. So please do keep an eye out for further details. For Flex Generation as well, we're going to be evolving this in different ways. There will be in-person events, written pieces, as well as the webinars. So hopefully we can build on this, and I'm hoping in time also encourage people to consider flexible workspace as a career to come into as well. So I think there's lots of opportunities with it. So thank you very much, Leanne.
Thank you.
And have a good rest of the day, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.